Chapter 1: The Dream Begins. In the early 1900s, the world was alive with excitement. New inventions were changing how people lived. The steamship was one of those inventions. It represented adventure and a chance to travel far away. Among the many ships, one was destined to become famous. That ship was the IMS Titanic. Titanic was born from the dreams of wealthy shipbuilders and ambitious companies. The White Star Line wanted to create a ship that would be the largest, the most luxurious, and the fastest. In Belfast, Ireland, at the Harland and Wolff shipyard, construction began. Workers toiled day and night, their hands skilled and their spirits high. They dreamed of a magnificent vessel that would cross the Atlantic Ocean and carry people to a new world. The ship was an engineering marvel. At 882 feet long and 175 feet tall, she was a giant. She had 16 watertight compartments designed to keep her afloat, even if some were flooded. Builders claimed Titanic was unsinkable. This claim filled many with pride. But Titanic was more than just a ship. She was a floating palace. Inside, first-class accommodations rivaled the finest hotels. Passengers would find grand staircases, beautiful chandeliers, and exquisite dining rooms. The Turkish baths, swimming pools, and gymnasiums were available to pamper those aboard. In second class, travelers enjoyed comfort and style. For third-class passengers, Titanic offered cozy cabins and good meals. Immigrants hoping for a new life in America looked forward to the journey. They dreamed of opportunity, freedom, and prosperity. Finally, the great day arrived. On April 10, 1912, Titanic was ready for her maiden voyage. The docks in Southampton, England, bustled with excitement. Onlookers gathered, eager to see the magnificent ship. Many waved goodbye as Titanic departed, setting sail for Cherbourg, France, and then to Queenstown, Ireland. Titanic's journey was about to begin. Passengers were filled with hope and excitement. They boarded the ship with dreams in their hearts and luggage in hand. Little did they know that this journey would become a haunting tale of tragedy. Chapter 2: The Journey Begins. As Titanic sailed across the English Channel, passengers began to explore the ship. In first class, the atmosphere was one of luxury and extravagance. People dressed in their finest clothes. Gentlemen wore suits, and ladies wore beautiful gowns. They dined on gourmet meals prepared by expert chefs. The dining room was a feast for the senses. On the upper deck, passengers strolled and admired the view. The sun shone bright, and laughter filled the air. Some relaxed in deck chairs, soaking up the sun. Others chatted excitedly about their plans for America. In second class, the mood was joyful as well. Families sat together, sharing meals and stories. Children laughed and played games on the open deck. Their parents smiled, happy to be on this great adventure. For the third-class passengers, the atmosphere was lively but simpler. They gathered in common areas, sharing meals and talking about their dreams. Many were immigrants, eager to build a new life in America. They spoke of family members waiting for them and the bright futures that lay ahead. On the second day, Titanic arrived in Cherbourg. More passengers boarded, filling the ship with even more hope. The excitement was contagious. Titanic set sail again, her bow cutting through the waves, heading for Queenstown. At Queenstown, Titanic made her final stop before crossing the ocean. A few more passengers boarded, including many who had traveled long distances to reach the ship. They were weary but hopeful. With a horn blast, Titanic departed, leaving Queenstown behind. The ship was now fully loaded. The mood was light and cheerful as Titanic sailed into the North Atlantic. The crew worked diligently, ensuring everything was running smoothly. Little did anyone know that they were heading into danger. Chapter 3: A Clear Night. The night of April 14, 1912, was cold but clear. The sky was filled with stars. Passengers on deck marveled at the beauty of the night. They enjoyed the calm sea, which felt like a blessing. But beneath this peaceful exterior, danger lurked. On the crow's nest, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee scanned the dark horizon. Their job was crucial. They had to spot icebergs that could threaten the ship. Unfortunately, they had no binoculars. This made their task even more challenging. At around 11:40 p.m., Fleet spotted something. A massive shape loomed ahead in the darkness. "Iceberg! Right ahead," he shouted. His voice echoed across the deck. The alarm bells rang loudly, signaling danger. Captain Edward Smith was on the bridge. He quickly ordered the ship to turn. The crew worked frantically, trying to evade the iceberg. But Titanic was too large and too fast. Despite their efforts, they struck the iceberg. The sound was unlike anything the passengers had ever heard. A low, grinding noise echoed through the ship. Many passengers felt a slight shudder but thought it was just the ship adjusting to the waves. Others were in bed, unaware of the danger. Chapter 4: The Impact. In the engine room, chaos erupted. Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder, quickly assessed the damage. Water was rushing into the ship's forward compartments. The watertight doors had not sealed properly. Andrews knew that the ship was in serious trouble. Captain Smith called for a meeting with his officers. They discussed the damage and the possibility of sinking. Andrews calculated that Titanic could stay afloat for about 2 hours. This was a devastating realization. Titanic, once thought unsinkable, was now in peril. Meanwhile, passengers remained unaware of the gravity of the situation. Some continued to enjoy their evening. Others gathered in the first-class lounge, sipping drinks and enjoying conversations. The crew began loading lifeboats, but there was not enough time. Titanic had only 20 lifeboats, enough for 1,178 people. The ship held over 2,200 passengers and crew. Many would not make it out alive. As the crew began to load the lifeboats, confusion and fear spread. Officers shouted orders. They urged women and children to board first. Panic started to rise among those who realized the danger. Chapter 5: The Call for Help. The time was ticking away. Morse code operators sent distress signals. The SOS was the universal call for help. Titanic's radio operators worked feverishly to contact nearby ships. The Carpathia, a ship over 50 miles away, received the distress signal but would take hours to arrive. Meanwhile, Titanic's lifeboats began to be launched. Some were filled with passengers, while others sat half empty. Many men were reluctant to leave. They believed the ship would be safe. As the ship tilted more steeply, passengers felt the panic grow. The freezing water lapped at the decks. The cries of the frightened filled the night. Mothers clutched their children tightly. The band continued to play, hoping to calm the chaos. They played hymn after hymn, their music echoing in the night. But it could not drown out the terror that had gripped the ship. Chapter 6: The Last Moments. At around 2:15 a.m., Titanic's stern began to rise out of the water. Passengers clung to the railings, terrified. Many were still aboard, refusing to believe the ship would sink. With a sudden, loud crack, Titanic's hull split. The ship broke in two. The bow sank quickly, dragging many passengers down with it. Screams filled the air as the ship disappeared into the cold depths. The stern rose higher, almost vertical. Those still aboard struggled to hold on. Some jumped into the frigid waters, desperate for survival. Others stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. As the last remnants of Titanic vanished beneath the waves, the night fell silent. Only the cries of the drowning remained. Chapter 7: The Struggle for Survival. In the icy waters of the Atlantic, chaos erupted. Survivors found themselves surrounded by debris and darkness. The temperature was freezing. Those who fell into the water faced almost certain death. Some managed to cling to pieces of floating wreckage. Others paddled frantically, trying to stay afloat. Life jackets were in short supply. The cold was numbing, and many struggled to stay conscious. From the lifeboats, passengers watched in horror. They saw friends and family fighting for their lives. The lifeboats had not been filled to capacity. The crew had believed they would be safe on the ship. One lifeboat rescued a few survivors. They pulled people from the water, but not enough. The cries for help echoed across the sea, but the night swallowed them whole. Chapter 8: The Arrival of Help. At 4 a.m., the IMS Carpathia arrived. The crew had worked tirelessly to reach Titanic's last known location. They found lifeboats and survivors scattered across the ocean. Rescue boats were lowered. The crew of the Carpathia acted quickly. They pulled as many survivors as they could from the frigid waters. Over 700 people were saved that night. On board the Carpathia, survivors were given blankets and hot drinks. The ship turned back towards New York City. The news of the disaster spread quickly. People were in shock. Families were torn apart. Friends were lost. The tragedy of Titanic was not just about a ship. It was about lives forever changed. Chapter 9: The Aftermath. The world awoke to the news of Titanic's sinking. Newspapers published headlines, reporting the unimaginable loss. Families searched for answers. Who was to blame? In the following weeks, inquiries were launched. Investigations sought to uncover the truth. Many pointed fingers at the White Star Line and the ship's builders. The idea that Titanic was unsinkable was now seen as a cruel joke. New safety regulations were introduced. Ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for every passenger. The tragedy of Titanic would not be forgotten. It became a symbol of the dangers of arrogance and overconfidence. Chapter 10: A Legacy of Remembering. More than a century later, the story of Titanic remains alive. Her wreck lies beneath the ocean, a reminder of the night that changed everything. People continue to be fascinated by the tales of those aboard. Stories of bravery, love, and loss are told and retold. Memorials honor those who perished, and movies depict the tragedy for new generations. The Titanic teaches us about dreams and aspirations. It reminds us that life is fragile. The spirit of those lost continues to resonate in our hearts. Conclusion. The Titanic disaster is more than a story of tragedy. It is a reflection of human ambition and the limits of technology. It reminds us that dreams can become nightmares in an instant. As we remember the Titanic, we honor the lives lost and the lessons learned. The ship may have sunk, but the stories of her passengers remain afloat, carried by the currents of history. Titanic will forever be a tale of human resilience and the quest for survival. Her legacy will endure, reminding us of the fragility of life and the importance of safety.